Fellas, welcome back. So I have a question. Like me, do you ever find yourself strutting through the Home Depot, nodding at the other contractors, when you ease by one of the little sales stalls for the tools and you see one of these swollen testicle deals for $99 for a tool and a battery? And it almost seems too good to be true. Well, of course, us guys in the know, we understand that this ploy is to rope you into the ecosystem. They get you on a bunch of batteries and they start busting heads when you need new batteries, right? Because the margins on these things are astro-freaking-nomical. I calculated the price for the batteries and what I speculate the components entered to be, and I think they've got about $13, and that's what I could build one of these batteries for. If I had the tooling to, of course, create the injection molded parts. But the batteries are cheap. The circuit board is super cheap. There's nothing expensive about these batteries except the egregious markup that they slam into the consumer. And of course, this is how they get you. So once you bought into it like I did with all these D-Willies, I've got Grandpappy here, was like one of the first tools that I bought when I struck out on my own doing general construction. And I got these. I got lots and lots of DeWalts, batteries galore, every DeWalt tool you could possibly imagine. Then I started doing tests, right? And I realized that DeWalt might be it might not be the bee's knees like I thought it was, but it's a really comfortable tool. I will give it that. Anyway, this test is going to revolve around the Wilk Dickey. And of course, we have the Rhyodium 1 Plus, which is also another fantastic offering. If they would rebrand this and give it some spiffy new name and like just kind of rebadge it, man, I think they could make a killing with these units. Anyway, so just like all of our other TTRs, oh, that's another public service announcement. If, for those of you in the know, so the people like the people that's been watching this channel for whatever, the last couple of weeks that I've been doing things, I'm going to acronym the videos, brand these videos with TTR. I'm not going to say test, teardown, and review. I'm just going to say TTR to preface the videos, and then of course I'm probably not going to mention it again. So if you're hearing this, we're going to have a little inside secret amongst us guys. So starting off with the testes, the first test that we're going to conduct is the drag races, and we're going to pit these two against each other, and then we're going to square it off against, you know, the champion. And I already know the champion because, of course, I've been doing this for a hot minute. Set. And as you can see, it was pretty close between these two, and then it was actually pretty close between these two too. The Wilk Dickey is just, man, it's a fantastic tool. The problem with it, and this one's actually got a smaller handle than the Fuel, which is strange because this is a more comfortable tool than the Fuel, because the Fuel, they put these freaking ginormous handles on the Fuel for whatever reason. And I guess if you came out of the factory with gigantic meat hooks, then that might be a viable option for you. But for me, I've got normal size hands, I reckon. I don't know. But that's something to factor into your purchasing decision. And then the Rhyodium it's heavier, but it's got this little place for my bird finger, which I like that. It rests nicely in it. Okay, anyway, I digress. So the next test that we're going to conduct late is the power, using the power analyzer. And then I squirted the guts out of it. I hooked it up backwards, so I got to get another one. But we pulled these three off before I scrambled it up. Perfect. And then, of course, again, the Wilk Dickey comes out on top, but not by much. The Rhyodium comes in a close second. And then the poor DeWalt, the redheaded stepchild of the DeWalt lineup, they just don't give it a lot of power. But one thing I will say that's super interesting to me is how close it is drag racing wise to these other tools with so much less power. And that really makes me believe that it's just a well-designed tool, right? I will definitely say that. I'll give it to this because there's only so many tests that you can conduct. And with this information, you have to deduce from it, you know, extrapolate from the information you have, the performance and the results of these tests. And the DeWalt, it's just, you know, it's a thing to consider when you're considering, you know, before you go to the getting spot to get your getting. You can think about how the engineering that goes into these tools are, you know, it's, oh man, I'm getting off track again. Anyway, so the next test that we're going to conduct late is the, what is it? Oh, the torque test. And this one, you're going to be quite surprised at the results of this one. It blew my mind. So yeah, right. This is a complete animal, redonkulous torque. This has actually got more torque than the fuel version or any other tool that I've ever tested, actually, by like 20 foot-pounds. And I'm trying to really come up with a viable, I mean, I don't understand exactly what makes this have so much torque, other than my little hoopty torque dyno is just, I mean, it just like, it's just, you know, anyway, these other two, you know, did not do good. And this is also an excellent point to make regarding the performance of the tool. Certainly does not revolve around the torque pins of it, obviously, right? Okay, anyway, let's proceed. So the next test that we're going to conduct is, let's do the Ripham's test. Get it out of that stinking glare. So, about 34, 42, 35, 47. Let's see. $28.89. That's the reason, if they just give it most speed. And then this is another stupid thing, like the chuck, and this is the second one that I've had that the chuck started binding up. I can't get my bit out. It's the tool gods are angry with me for talking smack about the D-Willie. So $29.70. This one makes a lot of racket. All right. Anyway, so I'm gonna put these, the Rip'ems versus the marketing wank Rip'ems. Oh, and the last test that we're going to conduct, small screw driving and the handling test. So take a listen. And then you can hear that this one's just got more zip zap to it. It just slamadoodles the screws in there harder and with more authority than the other two. Plus the extra Rip'ems factor heavily into that, I believe. Like the fuel version is just, it spins so dadgum fast. And that, you know, it's hard to really compete with a tool that just spins fast as the dickens. Okay, and then the last test, and of course the part that I'm always excited about is the teardown. So we're gonna tear them down and do the thing. Now we're in it. Let's see what she's talking about. So right off the rip, I want to acknowledge something that was immediately obvious to me when I got the clamshells apart. Look how bare bone, freaking bare minimum, nothing, no nonsense, no potting, nothing, not a nair, not a nothing, except straight up big motor power on the Milwaukee. They cut every corner except big motor. So they didn't mess around with none of the fancy fancy. They just stripped it down to its bare minimum, just put a big old motor in it. Took everything else out, and I really, really appreciate that. So we're going to start at the bottom, as always, with the terminals. And we learned in the last video that the plating on these terminal blades doesn't factor very heavily into the performance or the flow of electrodoodles through the wires. That doesn't make any difference. I thought that the copper, since it's a better conductor, would flow electrons better, but obviously that is not the case. A thing that I've always thought about the Rhyodium tools is the contact patch is like such a small little piece. Look at that. I mean, that's all that's touching the terminals of the battery. I guess it doesn't matter, but to me it probably would. And where these have got a big contact, doesn't it? Well, let's take a gander at the batteries. See, maybe the batteries just don't have much meat. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of meat on the batteries for those things to hit anyway. So I reckon it doesn't matter. I don't know. I'm not an electrical engineer. So moving on up, we're going to look at the gauge of the wires, and they're all about the same. Actually, the D-Wheelie is actually a little bit heavier gauge, isn't it? It's definitely stiffer, but you can see they spent much more time and effort. The build quality of the D-Wheelie is just amazing. It's always amazed me. Let me zoom in so we can take a better look. You see what's going on. Yeah, so and they've soldered these on. That's good. Whereas these are built into the terminal plate. And then they potted this with 2-part epoxy. If you'll recall, the Max XR, they use a silastic compound, whereas this is probably a 2-part epoxy. It may be a silicone potting compound, but I think it's 2-part epoxy. But the whole brain board, the ESC and everything is all this one uniform unit design, where the potentiometer, and this is a different potentiometer, cheaper. It doesn't have the nice clicky of the Max XR, but the board design is very similar, although it had bigger caps. So obviously the Max XR was designed for more power. whereas this one, not more power. Look at so that's an interesting thing. Look how small a gauge the ground wire is versus the power wire. Whereas in the Wilk Dickey, it's the same. So I don't know if that means anything. But let's take a look at the clamshell. So look at the meat. This is why, look how much meat the overmold is on this. So these are both, they're all PA6, glass fiber 30. So fiberglass reinforced nylon. And then I already know that this is a nitrile rubber grip versus these are butylene rubber. So the overmold on this is butylene. Butylene is a little bit more comfortable. Nitrile rubber is slightly harder. The thing about butylene rubber though is when you get petroleum on these two, right? When you get petroleum on these two units, it gets all gross and hemorrhoidy and bubbly, and then it starts to off gas this wretched, stinking butyric acid, which is the same chemical that's in human vomit. It makes human vomit stink like heck. Oh, look at this. See, this is a bellowed potentiometer prevent dust ingress. That's an interesting little designer-rooney that these two do not have. So the circuit board, the brain board for the Wilk Dickey is up here, and it's not potted, so if you get it wet, you are screwed. This thing would never survive a good wetting. Then the potentiometer, it feels good. This is a more comfortable tool than the Fuel because, like I said, it doesn't have the gigantic handle on it, but it does have a lot of rubber meat around it, whereas this one doesn't have as much meat as the Max XR or the Max, and this one's got some nice thick rubber, but it's not as comfortable because it's heavier. Then we're going to move up to the motor, and the motor in this one is so you can pop out the rotor, and it's actually a smaller motor. So they packed a lot of jam into this motor. Normally you can tell the performance of the motor by the length of the armatures and the windings. So, and there are a few windings, so this motor is definitely designed for high RPMs versus torque. And this one, I don't know what happened to this one, because it's a big fat ass motor. It just ain't got no stink to it. But like I said, it's must be a very efficient motor. It's also got these little silicone bumpers. That's cool. But this one's just like straight up bare bone, and then you can see they got this Celastic over the Hall effect sensors, and those are designed to calculate the position of the rotor as it's spinning my things in there. And then these are powdered metal pinion gears. It's a little old bitty baby tiny pinion gear. And then we can't get these apart. I've tried. I'm sure if I could went rooting around in there I could get it apart, but I'm not going to do it. Anyway, so it's got a solid roller bearing on the back to prevent dust ingress. I like that. 5-inch diameter based on the numbers. And then this one still warm, and then it's got a yellow Buna N O-ring, and yellow. So red is high temperature, yellow is, I don't know what yellow is. Yellow is for DeWalt, I reckon. And it's got a much bigger pinion gear, which is interesting, quite interesting. And then we got the old Rhodium over here with it's got a nice sort of unibody motor too, just like this one. This one, this one's just stripped down to the bears, the bear diddly doos. Oh man. Yep. Okay. So I think that it's fairly obvious. Well, it's really not obvious to me. I don't understand why. You can see all these MOSFETs. I'm going to explain how brushless versus brush motors. I've got lots of cool things that we can use to really get down to the nitty gritty of brushless pulse width modulators versus brushed pulse width modulators. And I've got my oscillomodoodle right there that we're going to do so we can measure and really kind of get into the meat and potatoes of how the two different motors operate. So the very last, and certainly not the least of the last, is the we're going to do the review. So review time. Yeah, okay, perfect, got it. So performance, it's jacked up with performance. I give it an 8 in performance. Yes. Ergonomics, this is more comfortable than the stinking Fuel FX because it had the big gigantic handle. So I'm gonna give it a 7.5 in ergonomics. Build quality, I mean, it's built fine, but they just didn't put a whole lot into it. You know, they certainly left something to be desired in, it's not potted, so there's no protection from water. I'm gonna give it a 7 in build quality. The electronics, they stripped it down to nothing, but they're still good, high fluting. So I'm gonna give it a 7.5 in electronics. Innovation, I'm gonna give it another 7.5 because I really like the fact that they kept it clean. They didn't do nothing. They just gave it all motor, and I always respect that. So I'm gonna give it a 7.5 in innovation. And if you can get this hot potato for $99, you got one, in my opinion, one of the best value tools money can buy. I'm gonna give it a 9.5 in value. I would give it a perfect 10, but there might be another tool that comes along, and I want to leave just a little bit of room, you know, for the mo better. So that's it. You can see the total, and then you can of course go to our website, review.wfskills.com, and you can check out this review and all the other reviews, and you can also leave your own review. So if you like this tool better, I want to hear about it. If you like this tool better, I want to hear about it. If you don't like this tool at all and it sucks, I want to hear about it. So let me hear about it. Till next time.